Hi guys, it's Talya Rose, and today I wanted to show you how to make delicious homemade bread. I probably make bread at least once a week, if not more, and there's just nothing like it when it comes out of the oven and it's fresh and it smells so good. You put butter on it and it just melts and makes it all magical and amazing. It makes any meal just amazing. It takes it to the next level. You can make just mediocre, spaghetti and meatballs and then have bread homemade, come fresh out of the oven and put that on the table, and all of a sudden your meal just became amazingly decadent. So I'm going to show you a quick, easy recipe. It only takes a couple hours in total, about 3 hours total to make, but you're only going to be actively working for just about 20 minutes. So for the bread today, you're going to need flour. I use all-purpose. You can also use bread flour. Bread flour just has higher protein, makes it a little bit more gooey, and creates more gluten in the bread making process, but all-purpose works great. We're also going to be using honey. Baking soda, we don't need. How did this get here? Active dry yeast, butter, sugar, salt, water, and milk. So this recipe will yield one large loaf, or you can separate it into two, or even more if you'd like. Freeze the rest of the dough, save it for a later date, and just go ahead and do a smaller one. Okay, so first things first, the hardest part and what intimidates most people about making bread at home is getting their dry yeast to activate. So it's actually quite simple, but there is a little trick to it. So to start the recipe, you're going to want 1/4 of a cup warm water. When I say warm, I mean between 110 and 115 degrees. So it's going to be hotter than a bath should be, but it shouldn't burn your hand when you stick it in. Any hotter than 115 degrees, the yeast will die. Any cooler, it's not really going to activate as quickly. So you're going to want, for this recipe, 2 1/4 teaspoons active dry yeast, and that also equals just 1 packet if you use the packet kind. I go through, like I said, I make at least 1 loaf of bread every week at home, so I go through lots and lots of yeast, so I just buy the bottles because that's cheaper. So 1 packet always equals 2 1/4 teaspoon active dry yeast. Now, what helps activate the dry yeast is sugar. So we're going to add our sugar to the yeast and water mixture as it starts to activate to get that going. 1 teaspoon sugar, and just go ahead and sprinkle that over the top of the yeast. And now I'm going to kind of swirl it around and kind of get it mixing. And this is going to begin to activate. So I will show you what that looks like in a moment. But if you give this about 10 minutes, it's going to look wonderful and frothy, and that way you'll know you're going to be ready to go and that your bread is going to rise beautifully once your yeast is doing what it's supposed to be doing. So let's set that over to the side, and let's continue on with the rest of the recipe. I am going to be using a KitchenAid mixer with a dough hook. So next we're going to want 4 1/2 cups all-purpose flour. 4 1/2 cups. If there's a way to do this without making a huge mess, I'm all ears, because I have no idea. I just always make a huge mess every single time. Probably unavoidable, but I don't know how. So next is the salt. Make sure that you do not add too much salt or garlic to your bread recipes, because garlic and salt kill bacteria, and what is yeast? It's a bacteria. 1 teaspoon salt. I'm not picky on what kind of salt. Any salt is fine. Next, you're going to want 1/3 cup honey. Come on, honey. Ugh. I went rock climbing a couple days ago, and so my arms are really sore, so this is actually quite painful. This might look easy, but it's not. Squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. Warming up your honey usually makes that process a little easier, but I was lazy. Okay, go ahead and add your honey. I'm sure there's an easier way also to measure the honey without getting your fingers sticky, but oh well. Honey has been added. Then next you're going to want 1 1/2 cups warm milk. This does not have to be between a particular temperature. It's not as touch and go as the water and the yeast is. It just shouldn't be cold when the yeast comes into the dry mixture. So just make sure it's a little bit warmed. And then next we're going to go ahead and melt 3 tablespoons of butter and add that as well. I'm going to go use the microwave because I did not do it beforehand. Alright, so that is it for the ingredients. Everything we need is in the bowl now except for the yeast and the water. And now that it has been about 10 minutes, frothy. Alright, this yeast is fully activated and frothy. So let's go ahead and dump it in to the rest of our mixture. And the sugar kind of always tends to settle at the bottom and kind of try to make a home there. So I want to make sure I get it all in the bowl. All right. And now we're gonna go ahead and mix this on a low speed until it comes together for about like 5 minutes or so. So now that I've mixed it on low for about 5 minutes and the dough has started to pull together, I'm gonna turn it on high. You're doing it in that order because if you turn it on high when the dough hasn't come together yet, you're gonna get dry ingredients flying out all over and flour just foofing in your face. So don't foof in your face. I hate this noise though. It's just like this annoying slapping sound. Okay, so it's been about 10 minutes and I always feel so lazy if I don't have something to do while it's mixing and kneading that I'll tend to just do it myself. So, okay, this dough is a perfect consistency. So it doesn't always come out this nice when I do it, but this happened to come out beautifully. So what you're looking for is you're looking for something that is gooey and moist to the touch, but does not stick to your hand when you touch it. You should be able to push your finger in, have it indent, and then spring back a little bit. Not all the way, but a little bit. So it's kind of like a spongy consistency. Again, if you are touching it and your finger is sticking, you don't have enough flour. So go ahead and feel free to throw on a little extra flour, anywhere from 1/4 to 1/2 cup more, even if necessary. Because, you know, sometimes while scooping, you can maybe have little pockets of air in your cup and you didn't realize you were only putting in about 3/4 of a cup instead of a cup. So, and over 4 cups, that can add up to a big difference. So make sure it's the right consistency. So now that I have reached this stage of the bread making game, I can go and decide how much bread I actually want to make. If I let this rise for about an hour, I could throw this in the oven and make a huge, nice, beautiful loaf. But the beauty of homemade bread is that you eat it fresh right there on the spot, and I can't eat this much bread all in one sitting, even though I've tried and I would love to. I can't quite do it all myself, not even with the help of my family. So unless I have friends coming over for dinner or something, I usually turn this loaf into 2 loaves. So at this stage of the game, if you would like to save part of your bread, just get a freezer double Ziploc bag, throw it in there, make sure all the air is out, throw it in your freezer, and you will have beautiful homemade bread, again, another day, because the bread will not sacrifice any flavor or texture or consistency if it's frozen beforehand. It's just as delicious and fresh, so kind of a great hack. When I want to bake that, I'll pull that out of the freezer the morning before I'm going to use it, and I'll just kind of let it defrost for a few hours, and then I'll throw it in a bowl and then let it rise and take it through the same process I'm about to take you through with this now. Oh, now that I have my 1/2 loaf ready, I'm going to throw it in a greased bowl. I like to use olive oil, but you can use other oil if you like, or even shortening or butter or whatever you have on hand, or just spray it with Pam if you'd like. Go ahead and set it in the bottom of the bowl and then put a damp towel or saran wrap over the top to make sure that it's nice and airtight. And what we're going to see is we're going to see this dough begin to rise, and we're going to want it to double in size. So that's going to take about 50 to 55 minutes, and you can go ahead and put this in a warm place in your house. If it's freezing cold where you live, you can also turn your oven on about 100 and then turn it off right away once it reaches temperature and throw it in the oven, and that'll be just warm enough to get it to rise without having it cook. So you can do that as well. So I need to do laundry and I don't have a cloth to spare. So I'm going to go ahead and put some saran wrap over this bad boy. I'm going to throw this in the windowsill and let it rise for about an hour. So what I like to use, since I'm using the 1/2 loaf, I put half the dough in the freezer. I use the 4.5 by 8.5 Pyrex pan. You can use anything else, and if you're going to be using the whole loaf, you can either split it into 2 pans or just use a bigger pan. So when you transfer the dough from the bowl to the pan, it is just kind of naturally going to deflate. So you don't need to worry about kneading it again. You don't need to worry about it just all of a sudden going flat, because fear not, it will rise again. So once you've put it in the pan that you're going to bake it in, let it sit for about another hour until it's risen and doubled in size, and then you're going to be ready to bake your loaf. To turn the oven on to about 425 and cook it for about 20 minutes. This is totally dependent on the pan that you put it in and how hot your oven tends to run. So just keep a close eye on it. You're going to want to make sure the top is nice and golden. Now, right before the bread goes into the oven, I like to coat the top of the bread with either egg white, egg yolk, milk, or oil. Totally up to you, whichever you choose. If you use oil, it's gonna be a little bit crispier. If you use egg white, it's going to be a bit harder. And then if you use egg yolk with the egg white, it's just gonna be a little bit eggier. So once you have coated it with the substance of your desire, depending on the caloric intake that you wish, go ahead and sprinkle a little bit more salt on the top. And if you are so bold or would like to take it a fun direction, my favorite is I put on dried crushed rosemary on the top. And it's just magical, and it comes out and it's so good. So once it's cooked, pull it out of the oven, let it sit for about 10 minutes, and then cut it into it, and it's amazing. Put butter on it, put honey on it, just eat it plain, dip it in olive oil. It's absolutely incredible and amazing, and I hope you guys love it. I hope I explained that as easy as it is to actually do it, and I hope I helped take some of the intimidation out of actually making it yourself, because it is so cheap and so delicious and just really doesn't take that much time to make your own homemade bread, and then you're all of a sudden freaking Betty Crocker. All right, well, I hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks for watching.